Good evening. Right now, Metro Police are desperately searching for the person or people responsible for killing a man and a woman.
I got a male down in the middle of the street.
Breaking news now, a triple shooting leaves 2 dead.
Never expect for somebody to tell you your loved one was murdered.
This Labor Day will mark 42 years that have haunted the St. Cloud family.
30 years. 30 years this family has waited for answers.
A couple months go by, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you really start to struggle with the idea that the case might not get solved and that somebody might get away with murder.
It's very unfortunate that we have any cold cases at all, and certainly unfortunate that we have as many as we do. And that's why Ryan's work and the work of Project Cold Case is so important.
Thanks for joining us this evening. We've got a very special guest and want to jump right into it. So, LaTresa,
hello.
Thank you so much for joining me.
All right, you
are one of my favorite people in the world. For anybody that doesn't know, you are a beacon of light and hope to everybody that you come in contact with. I have true admiration for everything that you do in the world, that I see you do in the world, whether it's your job or whether it's your personal fun times, the things that you promote and raise awareness for, and the things you share with others. Every time I think of you, I smile and I appreciate you coming on here because I know that your advice and some of the stuff that you can share with our viewers will just be instrumental in helping them navigate through what nobody ever asks to be put through. But sometimes we find ourselves in these positions. And when you do, you really look towards people with experience and knowledge to help guide you, or you should. I hope people do. And that's you for me. So I want to welcome you and thank you again, and let everybody know that you are a board member for Project Cold Case. We've had 3 of these survivor workshops so far this month. We started off with investigations with a board member. Then we had prosecutions with a board member. Now we're doing advocacy with a board member. And so I like for the world to know that Project Cold Case surrounds itself with true subject matter experts all throughout the criminal justice process. And so since we have the ability to speak to you, this is the perfect opportunity to share you with the world. So here we are. If you don't mind, can you give our viewers a little bit of background about you in advocacy, how you ended up where you are, and actually where you are?
Yes, I can and I will. Thank you, Ryan, so much for that warm welcome. I am glad to be a part of Project Cold Case, as well as part of being an advocate for the past 20-something years. I started working at our local domestic violence shelter called Hubbard House. I was a child victim advocate working with child witnesses of domestic violence and their parents. 14 years ago this month, I transitioned to the Navy Family Advocacy Program to work with active duty or spouse victims of domestic violence. And 7 years ago, I began working with the Sexual Assault Program as a certified victim advocate. During my tenure as a victim advocate, I became a part of several task forces regarding crimes committed against children and adults. I currently serve as a member of the Duval County Domestic Violence Fatality Review Team, where homicides related to domestic violence are reviewed and recommendations are made for stakeholders and the community at large. I currently still volunteer for Hubbard House, trying to get back into working direct services, but mainly a community education speaker for them to bring awareness to domestic violence. But child abuse, unsolved homicides, domestic violence, sexual assault. All of those disciplines are things that I'm interested in order to be able to help victims after they've experienced those, or secondary victims as they, transition through their recovery.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Amazing stuff that you have done and continue to do. I need to ask everybody to bear with me a little bit here tonight. I'm going on very little sleep. I've been all over the country today, and I just tried to turn the fan on in my room because I was getting hot, and I think the batteries all died. The light went off. The fan's going at 1,000,000 miles an hour now, and so that's that. And I also have a feeling, because I've been out of town for the last 3.5 days, that at some point my children are going to come home and they haven't seen me since Saturday evening, and they're probably going to rush up here and interrupt. But please know that this is important to us. This is part of being an advocate, is juggling family and advocacy. And I was in Texas since Sunday, helping assist and advocate for a family of a woman who has been unidentified, had been missing since 1966, and was identified this week with the help of Innovative Forensic, who is a huge partner and friend of Project Cold Case. They used investigative genetic genealogy to identify this woman who was found in a pool in the middle of Texas in 1966, but had been unknown. Her identity had been unknown ever since. And so we went out there to Texas the last couple of days and participated in a press conference where they identified her, Jolene Hemming, after 54 plus years. So that meant a lot of early mornings and travel during COVID, which is not exactly my favorite thing to do, but obviously this was very important. So just bear with me. If I look tired, it's because I am. If I slip up and say something, it doesn't make sense, it's probably because my brain is mush right now. But this stuff is important, and so I didn't want to miss this opportunity to share this with so many people. So let's jump right in and let's talk about the benefits of advocacy, because I get to speak from the survivor perspective. When my dad was murdered in 2009, I got a phone call from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office victim advocate, and I got a letter from the state attorney's office victim advocate, which I didn't know what they were or what they did, but they provided me with contact information and told me if I needed them to reach out. So I didn't really utilize those services until months later when a nonprofit organization reached out to me with advocates, and so that was my experience. But let's talk about a little bit from your world what those benefits are and why it is important to, if you are in that right space, to reach out and to utilize those services.
Okay, so the key to advocacy is for victims to not be alone or to feel that they are alone. Advocates are in place to provide information and offer support. And we can only help when we are tapped into. So when someone takes advantage of our services, we assist them with navigating through the investigative process and supporting them through their recovery. We understand that each case is different, but we have to view that situation from the victim's perspective and operate in a way that supports their wishes. And this also includes utilizing victim advocacy. Having an advocate is an option, but we always want to make sure that victims are aware that they do have a say in their care and that their voices do matter. We will support victims as long as they wish to receive our services. And I've noticed doing this work, working with victims of trauma, that every time they hear from an advocate, every time they hear from someone that is a part of the system dealing with their case, they are reminded of that trauma. So it could be a good day when they're like, I am so excited you reached out to me. And it may be a day where they're like, oh my goodness, I wish they would stop calling. So we can't choose what day it is for our victims. We just need to be there when they want us to be there for them, and to let them know that we're there when they're ready. Even if our calls go unanswered, that may not mean they don't want to work with us anymore or have anything to do with us. It may not just be a good day for them, and we have to respect that and re-engage when they're ready to re-engage us. But we're there for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And not take offense, with as an advocate, we really do have to assess each victim or survivor individually. You can't treat everybody the same. Everybody is different. Everybody experiences their trauma and grief differently. So it is important for us to understand that and to do the best we can. And like you said, just letting them know that we are here. We would never force anybody to talk to us or participate in the resources we provide, but we believe that there's value in those resources, and we want to make sure that everybody is at least educated and knows they are available. And I know, I don't know about with your work with, with domestic violence and sexual assault. I haven't done those types of advocacy.
Right.
And so I don't know if it's more frequent that you get the people that are upset about being reminded of their victimization. What we find, and we get that occasionally, but most of our survivors are so happy that somebody remembers their loved one or cares, that it's really more rare that we get those that say, I wish you would stop calling, or you're reminding me of the worst day of my life. We get them occasionally. The interesting thing is that when we do get them, we'll get them from one family member, but then like 3 other of the same family feel differently, and they want us to continue reaching out to them, and they want the support that we offer. So that creates another interesting dynamic that we have to be aware of, that sometimes, just because one family member says no, it doesn't mean that another family member doesn't need it. And so sometimes they have to express that too. Okay, you know how to get in touch with us if you need us. But by the way, is there anybody else in the house or in the family that we can assist?
Yes.
So you never know what you're going to get.
It varies.
It does. So, and let's talk a little bit about, the information that is inside an advocate's head, because really what we do is just provide information, and answers, and a lot of what we do, I should say, and resources. And when somebody calls up and they think they're all alone because, they feel a certain way, or they have this one thing that's bothering them, we have to know, or we should know, how to provide some kind of service for whatever that issue is. And there's nothing worse than not knowing how to refer somebody to the help that they actually need, and so I know you take a lot of pride in that, and we do at our office as well. If somebody calls up and they need something, if we don't know how to get them, what they need, or in touch with the person that can help them, then the whole office shuts down, and we spend, the next period of time figuring out how to help them and calling them back. So, anything you want to add to that?
Yes. Advocates, we gain our experience and knowledge with the criminal justice system, processes, what to expect, by our experiences with victims that we've worked with, or by networking and training. We don't just have all of this knowledge just because I work at a certain organization or you are at Project Cold Case. We don't just have all the answers. So we have to start experiencing those situations with our victims, whether it's going to a court hearing, whether it's being there with them when they receive some information and helping them debrief that information. But networking, it's very important that we are involved in the community outside of our agency to encourage more learning so that we're better equipped to answer questions for victims or know where to find the answers. So if I just stay in my office and never go to a community meeting, never network, never call or look into things that are updated and occurring, I'm not going to have the accurate information and updated information for a victim. When we refer to organizations and we network, we're learning more about those agencies. And we're listening to what our agency provides. And we may say, no, that's not a service we need at this time. But I may have a victim that needs that in the future. We as victim advocates must ensure that we're referring victims to reputable organizations, a place that has been vetted, been around, or you see that their mission matches your victim's needs or your needs, and you're researching before making a referral. What we don't want to do is refer someone to an agency that is no longer providing a specific service, or they're not accredited or backed by an organization that has good credit. Right. You want to make sure we're not sending victims somewhere where they can be re-victimized because we said they can help you with this service, and then they tell them, no, we don't do that anymore, or there's a fee for it, or we can't see you for 6 to 9 months. So we have to do our homework and stay on top of things as advocates so that we're not putting our victims through a bunch of changes when we're just really trying to help them.
Absolutely. And I'll take it a step further, and something we have experienced. We have, podcasts are really popular right now, and true crime podcasts are even, they're off the charts popular, but it's a really, really, really saturated market. So you have those handful of true crime podcasts that are ridiculously popular and have millions of listeners, and I assume do a lot of good things. I don't really listen to podcasts, but then you have like everybody with a computer trying to create their own podcast and use true crime. And families are sometimes so desperate to get their story out there, their loved one out there, that the idea of doing a podcast we think is, this great thing where millions of listeners are going to hear it, and somebody may hear it that has information. But the reality is a lot of these podcasts are, listened. These are not advocates that are asking questions. They're not trained professionals. They don't have, psychiatry or psychology backgrounds. They don't have, social work backgrounds. And all they know is what they've seen on TV, and can really re-victimize a family or ask questions that are inappropriate or out of line. And so, we get a lot of podcasts that reach out to us and ask, for families. And quite honestly, we don't have the time to vet all of these podcasts. So we just don't do it. We don't refer to podcasts because we don't know any that have been vetted that we know will, treat those families the way they should be treated. And that's just one small example of how, technology is evolving, and there's new techniques for survivors of unsolved homicides to reach the world and get their loved one's story out. But that you still have to be careful. You can't just jump into anything. I've had families call me in tears after participating in a podcast because things were said that they shouldn't have said. Information was released that the detectives were upset about. Just there's all kinds of little things that can go wrong if these resources haven't been vetted. And that's kind of the newest one for us is podcasting. And so we're trying to address that now. We're going to be working on that this week in our office because I'm just getting inundated with requests from podcasts, from TV reporters, and we're just not comfortable just handing out. Well, we'll never hand out a survivor's contact information
Right.
without permission, but it's hard to not have vetted somebody and then call a family and say, this person wants to talk to you, and we have no idea if their interest is in your best interest or if their interest is just in gaining some views and clicks and
Followers.
followers. So that kind of stuff is always running through an advocate's head. A good advocate's head.
Right. Someone that cares.
Yeah, is are these resources actually good for these individuals? So I want to talk about something that's kind of uncomfortable for me, but this is something that I truly admire about you is boundaries and setting boundaries. And there's like these ethical boundaries that we all learn, when we're becoming an advocate and when we do trainings. But and I don't want to, sometimes boundaries have a rough connotation, like you're mean and you're just saying, get away from me, here's my wall. But we are in a very compassionate industry where we do this because we truly care, and we care about these victims, and we care about seeing them get help, and we care about seeing them heal, and we care about them being able to smile and laugh and not feel guilty. And we become bonded because of we go on this journey with them together, and we assist and we lead them and we refer them with trust that the people we're sending them to are going to take care of them the way we do. And but it is important because for every victim out there, like you and I don't advocate for one person ever. It's always countless individuals that all have very unique experiences, and are handling their grief or their trauma and their journey in different ways and at different stages. And that can just it can be heavy. And when you come home and you want to just kick your feet up and relax and watch something mindless on TV, that sometimes is difficult to separate that stuff and put the phone down and not reply to that email, to not give out your cell phone number, to not give people constant access to you when you're not there. And when I say I respect and admire how you set boundaries, we don't interact with the same victims much, so I don't necessarily see that, but I see you set boundaries with everybody in your life that, this is what I will do for you, and I will do it to right here. But beyond here is a violation of these boundaries and of this relationship that we have set. And so that's how I want to kind of set the stage for you telling us a little bit about boundaries, because I see it a lot more in where we do interact in the same way, with the same people, that you set boundaries, not just for the victims you're serving, but for your friends, for your colleagues, for coworkers, for people that you assist outside of advocacy as well.
Right. Yes, exactly. So with boundaries, I think boundaries are important for our own well-being. We have to set some sort of boundary to be able to separate work from play, from loved ones, from our friends, to be able to make room for ourselves. So first part I want to touch on is ethics, because boundaries can violate some ethical things that we must adhere to as advocates. We know that most agencies or professions have a code of ethics that employees must abide by as well. Those are doctors, lawyers, law enforcement, judges. Almost every profession has a code of ethics. And what ethics are for is to ensure relationships within that organization remain professional and that minimum standards are being met. So with a victim service agency, service standards would be caring for the victim, That should be a part of the ethical code, putting the victim first and prioritizing their needs and what they would like to see happen. Not that we can control that, but making sure we hear those things and that we're working the best that we can to get them the answers. So you would expect me being in this field for over 20 years to have circumstances in which a friend or a loved one becomes a victim of a crime or has questions regarding victimization. And as Ryan said, we're not being mean when we set boundaries, but I personally do not work with my friends or loved ones. I want to ensure that our friendship remains intact and I'm not jeopardizing that friendship or relationship because they may have a certain expectation of me. Well, you work there. Can you make sure they do A, B, and C? Can you check this? Can you call that? And then I'm crossing the line because they're related to me or because they're my friend. I want the system to work as it does with the agency that I refer them to in making sure they receive the care that they need. I want to be a supportive friend or family member that can listen to them, be non-biased, and not go down and have my personal feelings involved when I'm advocating for a loved one. So that is why I personally, I cannot speak for every advocate. I personally don't advocate for loved ones or close or friends because there are professionals that can help. And even though I want to maintain our relationship that we have outside of what I do for a living. As far as victims that I work with or come in contact with, I'm friendly with them, but I don't become friends, at least not right away. Because again, we need to keep that relationship professional. They need to know I'm doing the best as a professional for them. A friendship can be worked up to, but again, we don't want them to expect us to do certain things because they're our friend. So we have to be very, very careful with that. We may, if we're friends with the victim, we may begin to share opinions as advocates. We're not supposed to do that. We're only supposed to be in place to listen to them and offer resources and not put what we would do or what we think or how we would respond to whatever that situation is. But when we cross over into that friendship, when you cross over to a friendship, then it's we get emotionally involved. And I have seen sad cases. I've seen situations that disappoint me, but I must always remain professional. So I try my hardest. It is a challenge to keep them separated.
And this kind of goes back to what you talked about with our experience. So what I like to do is if a survivor comes to me with a scenario and they want my advice and they're asking me what they should do, and like you said, like that's not my call. You know, I my job is not to tell them what they should do, but what I do tell them is I lean back on my experience and I share with them scenarios that I've experienced with other survivors and the outcomes of those so that they have all of the information. So we've been doing this long enough to have experienced plea deals, trials. I've never, knock on wood, been in a trial where there was an acquittal or even a hung jury, but I've had, death penalty cases that didn't go the way the family wanted, one way or the other. You know what I mean? And sentencing hearings where there was not a very long sentence or a sentence as long as the family wanted. So instead of my own personal beliefs and opinions, what I like to do is share those experiences with families so that they at least have the information on what we have experienced. And I think that's valuable.
Yes, it is. Because you've seen it. Yes.
Right.
That is.
Yeah.
Another boundary that I've seen it a dozen or more times, where a victim or someone you're working with wants to give you a gift. Boundaries includes not accepting gifts of gratitude. A thank you card is great. Thank you for all you did. You supported me. I'm so grateful for you. But when I open that card and it has Starbucks or a tropical smoothie gift card, both which I really love, I cannot accept that. So I do need to return it and let them know I appreciate your gesture. It is my job to serve you. It is my job to be here for you, but I cannot accept this gift. We don't want them to believe that it's an exchange for payment. Yes, it is a thank you.
Right.
It is a thank you, but we don't want the idea to ever raise up in anyone's head that they have paid us or gave us something in exchange for our services. A thank you is enough. Sometimes we don't get a thank you, and that is fine. We are not here for ourselves. We are here for them. So I don't want to, knock an advocate that may accept a cup of coffee or something like that, but I personally would not accept that, because I don't want that to be something that comes into question later.
Yeah, it is. It's like you said, it puts us in an awkward position, because we don't do this for recognition or for thanks or certainly for gifts. And that gift is coming from such a place of appreciation, that they don't feel like anybody else was listening. But it's an awkward position to be in, because it's not necessary. It's not needed. And like you said, the last thing you want is for somebody else to think, well, they're giving them special treatment because they sent over, a Starbucks card, or, or that the only way you can get your full attention, the full attention of your advocate, is to bestow gifts upon them. That is
Right.
not what we want. Like you said, I mean, thank you cards are some of the greatest things you could possibly do for somebody that you appreciate. Particularly because people really don't do them anymore. You don't really see people sending out thank you notes. But when we do get them, it really is. Those are the things that are pinned to the board in our office. That we truly do. Appreciate and memorialize. We had a survivor wanted to buy the office lunch, and we accepted it. This was a special survivor that has become a big part of Project Cold Case beyond just advocacy, and really, really wanted to provide lunch for the office, but had provided more money than we needed for lunch.
Yeah.
So we went to lunch, and then we just left the balance on the tip for the server. Because again, try to pass it forward, and pay it forward, and give somebody else reason to smile. So, but it is one of those things that is truly not necessary, and not something that we look for, or we look to to as reciprocating what we have done, as our job. So
Right.
so thank you for sharing that
You're
with us.
very, very welcome. So then, advocates, we have a tough job. Not only are we tasked with caring and listening to individuals, we take in a lot of not so good information. How bad a situation went, how bad a case went. The trauma in and of itself is horrific enough. So we must set boundaries for ourselves. We must take care of ourselves as advocates, those in the helping profession, nurses, officers, all of us that have a job where we are to provide a service. We hear things that are unfortunate on a regular basis. And I want to tell you all that vicarious trauma is real. You can't prevent from being affected by what you hear or what you're constantly seeing, but you can control how you handle it. When you're not at work, or when I'm not at work, I try not to do work things such as researching and looking up things that fall under investigative duties. I know with Project Cold Case, your goals, you are the secondary victims of something that is unsolved. So you do want to continue to look into that as a victim of that. Advocates, on the other hand, we're not to go digging and looking and researching, because that means it has overtaken, our personal lives. We're going to listen to you. We're going to support you while we're working with you. And hey, that's something you may want to share with law enforcement. That may be something you may want to share with the state attorney's office. We're going to empower you and encourage you to do that. But when it comes to us having boundaries, we shall not be at home looking up things like we are investigators. We're only supposed to support you all. These things can wear us down as helping professionals. And the saying says, if I'm not good to myself and I have nothing left in my cup, how can I pour out to you? Because I'm just overwhelmed with everything I'm receiving, and I'm not taking time for myself. When I'm with you as your advocate, I'm giving you 100%. I'm giving you everything I have. I'm giving you access to me when you need it. But when it's not work time, they call it me time. So that's what we have to do to preserve ourselves and our well-being.
Yeah, you mentioned
Go ahead.
vicarious trauma and it being real, and compassion fatigue is real too.
Yes.
If we don't take care of ourselves, if we don't actively participate in self-care and separate ourselves from these victimizations and these families that we care so much about and these stories, then we will be no good to anybody.
Right.
At some point we would burn out. So we have to be able to separate ourselves and take care of ourselves.
And also making sure we follow the victim's lead. How often do they want to be followed up with? Do you know that frequently reaching out to a victim constantly over and over and over, sometimes it's about us. And we need to make sure we're checking on them because they want us to, not because of us. That's a way we can set boundaries as well. Let them tell us how often. And I do tell them now, if I don't hear from you in a certain amount of time, I'm going to call you. But we do want to give victims their space and opportunity to let us know how often they would like to hear from us, and we'll do that. So then last thing on boundaries is, you must have an outlet for yourself as an advocate. I have an outlet. Whether it's seeing someone professionally or just having some productive self-care. By productive, I don't mean punching walls when you get angry and doing things that are not productive or healthy. Drinking is not self-care. Some people will say that helps them, but when we're professionals, that's not a way to cope with being overwhelmed or having those thoughts about work and the trauma that we're hearing. So we as advocates must take care of ourselves so that we can be a good service to you.
Yeah, and I want to touch on what you were talking about with victims leading, and how, we, like, Frida does a great job in Project Cold Case. She calls a family, first things out of her mouth is now a good time to talk. Because it's not always a good time to talk. Sometimes they're at work, sometimes they're at the grocery store, and this conversation is not one that needs to be had, in those situations. But then also I hear her all the time say, would it be okay if I call you back? How about I call you back next Wednesday or, next month and check on you? And she knows enough we know enough when we're talking to these individuals. If they hesitate, that's your, well, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll call you in a couple of months. If you need me, call, me. And you can read them, and you can understand. And because sometimes, people have a hard time telling you exactly what they need, and they don't need you to call next week or next month, but they do want you to check back in with them in a few months, and so that really is important. And I want to hit on some of these questions because I know that they're valuable, and I want the people that ask them to get their answers if they have to go have dinner or whatever. So Christine asked, after promoting my loved one's case, I feel that the police and advocates don't respond to us anymore. And what do you suggest we do about that? So this kind of ties in. We said we were going to talk a little bit about community-based versus system-based advocacy. And sometimes this is a problem with system-based advocacy when it's law enforcement or the state attorney's or district attorney's office, where an advocate is in a really tough position, because if you're asking the advocate for information and the advocate is going to the prosecutor or the detective and they're refusing to call the family back, or they're not giving that information to the advocate doesn't have anything to say, and probably is scared to call and say, the detective won't give me that, or won't call you back, or the prosecutor doesn't want to. With community-based advocacy, no one at the sheriff's office signs my paycheck. No one at the state attorney's office signs your paycheck. So we have a little bit of, I don't want to say like leeway, but we have the ability to ask questions and go to people that maybe system-based advocates don't have. They have their immediate supervisor, and that's who they can go to. You and I don't have to play by that rules. If somebody at the sheriff's office is not responding to a family, we can call their supervisor and their supervisor and their supervisor until somebody comes through. But in your experience with the way you advocate, what do you suggest? Do you get those calls when somebody's like, hey, somebody was supposed to call me and they didn't, or they won't return my call?
Yeah, so with system-based, and that's what your police advocates, and I mean, not police advocates, law enforcement advocates and state attorneys advocates, they're in place to help with the gathering of information, getting victims to cooperate, taking in information as that case makes its way through the system. And because it may still be at an investigative point, they may not be able to share based on it being still open. Yes, we want to know what's happening with our loved one's case or with our case, but sometimes they're not able to share that. Now, not getting a phone call back, that's a different story, and that is where we would want to have one of our community-based advocates or someone to call on your behalf to ask, hey, is there or are there any updates? That's all we would like to know. So having an advocate outside of that system, because again, they're just there to move the case, to collect or help the state attorney or help law enforcement with information and really to get your cooperation. Not to say they don't have the compassion or anything that the community-based advocates have, but they're really just there to help move the case along, notify you of a court date, notify you if there's new information, but not share with you what that new information is. They're very lipped, tongue-tied on what they can share with us. But I agree with Ryan, when you're not getting any response, then we do want to involve other individuals to just tell me something.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in. I feel we are very close with a lot of system-based advocates that work, and they do great work, but sometimes they are limited within their own agency, and that's that's the nature of system-based advocacy. It doesn't mean they're bad, doesn't mean they're not useful. But if you find yourself in a position where they are unable to assist in the way you need, then it might be time to reach out to a community-based advocate and see if they can nudge things along a little bit. This was a question, I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, probably more on me, but Derek asked, does a homicide case having an arrest warrant outstanding add to any additional factors to how you work with those specific families? And I mean, every family has differences, and we work with cases, before Project Cold Case, and I was an advocate still for homicides. It didn't matter if it was solved or unsolved or whether there was a warrant out. We served all of them. But what I found was that the unsolved ones were the ones that were kind of being left behind, because we spent a lot of our time in the courthouse. And if you don't have an arrest, you're not spending any time in the courthouse. But yeah, there's always differences with every single victim or survivor that we serve. When it's a case like they pointed out, the Michael Sanchez case, which is the one that we've had and advocated for now for almost since Project Cold Case's existence. There is a known suspect or a known offender. He was caught on camera stabbing the victim at a gas station. He's known. There's an active warrant out for his arrest. That family is so active in the online community and social media community and sharing pictures of the suspect in hopes that somebody somewhere will see him and turn him into authorities. And that is obviously something that we don't deal with a lot of our unsolved homicides, is having a face to share with the community to say, this is who did this, help us find them. A lot of times we're looking for, somebody that is unknown. So there are definitely differences. But again, when you're talking about 10 and 20 years of experience with advocacy, we have experienced a lot. And I'll never say I've seen it all, because inevitably something comes along new and educates me. But we've seen a lot.
With this one, and I hate to use the cliche, but all we can do is hope, and that family is doing everything that they possibly can to continue to put that offender's face out there. There's not much we can do differently as an advocate except for support you in your efforts, and offer, we hope they get them. Hopefully it's getting close. We really, there's not really much we can do with that. That is on law enforcement, to be vigilant and try to arrest this person. But it's,
and we do encourage them to keep sharing. And I know the family well, and I know that it's got to be frustrating, because they share and they share and they share, and keeping that faith and keeping that hope that, you can't control who sees and when they see it. So you got to keep putting the information out there, so that at some point the right person does see it, Yes. This is something we probably should have talked about early on, and you kind of hit on it with becoming an advocate. Casey wanted to know, what are the qualifications of an advocate? How can one become one? What type of accreditation or experience? And there is some. This is not just like you like to hear about crimes, so you become an advocate.
Right.
That is definitely not the key.
Yes.
But can you share with us how we got to this point?
Yes, that is a very good question, Casey. First thing, you have to care. You need to care about a cause or some type of something that you're passionate about, and then go get trained in that. Formal training is what I'm speaking on. There's one thing to experience victimization and say, I want to give back, I want to help, I want to be an advocate, but you still need training, and you do need to be out of your circumstance for a good amount of time, because you may be acting as, I'm going to make sure these individuals' case doesn't go the way mine did, or I want it to go the way mine did. So we want to make sure you have formal training if you're a survivor of a violent crime, of a crime. So advocacy is a profession. Anybody can advocate on behalf of an individual or a cause, but when you are speaking of victim advocacy, there are trainings that are required. So it depends on which discipline you're working with, whether it's child abuse, whether it's homicide, domestic violence, sexual assault. Each discipline has a core training or a general victim advocate training that is usually, it's called core training. It's usually about 30 to 40 hours. And that's the training. Some of the disciplines require you to become certified. My position requires me to become certified. It's not just going through a training. I have to be background screened. I have to make sure I have no violent crimes in my past or in my record. Making sure that I'm going to do what's in the best interest of individuals I work with. Do advocates do things that are not professional? Yes, just like any other profession, but they screen us within the certification to make sure we don't have an adverse background. Then with the 40 hours, the core training, you need to have ongoing training. Some certifications require you to have 10 hours during your certification. Some require 16. My program requires 32. Ryan's program requires 32. So the key is to constantly be educated in whatever discipline that you are, whatever population that you're serving. Experience. I didn't walk in the door at Hubbard House with experience. I didn't know what Hubbard House was. I thought I was going to work in a child care center. Those children experience domestic violence. So I quickly learned what domestic violence was and how to respond to individuals that witnessed it or experienced it. Some of our education comes from experience, as I mentioned before, and others are of a formal education. So in addition to college, because I don't know of a degree that specifically just hones in on advocacy. There's a domestic violence program out in Colorado. You can get a degree in that. However, advocacy for just general serving victims, you would need to, I think that's Bertha's question, you would need to be in contact with the agency that does the particular service that you're looking for, becoming an advocate and finding out what their requirements are. So it just depends on which way you're going with your advocacy.
And for Bertha, like for specifics with Project Cold Case, we have a grant from the Florida Attorney General's office, which is the Victim of Crime Act grant. And that requires us to have 40 hours of training to get that certificate. That is also costs money, and usually have to be like, to get that training, you have to get it through an organization that receives a VOCA grant. So the Attorney General's office offers those trainings, whether it's the 40-hour certification or it's the 1 to 2 to 8 hour long trainings that they put on throughout the year to keep your certification up. Those are ways to do it, but that's not the only way to do it. There are other groups out there that provide trainings for advocates. LaTresa and I are both credentialed advocates, which is, more training and more experience. Again, this is a profession. It's not a hobby. In fact, it's hard even with volunteers, because it's just really hard to have somebody that comes in for a very short period of time occasionally, because when a family gets to know you, sometimes they call and they want to speak to you. And if you're only there for 8 hours a month, that can be difficult, you know? So, but definitely reach out to the agency that is providing the advocacy that you're interested in, and find out how you can become an advocate with them, because they may have to be the ones that pay for the training and that send you to the training. And these trainings, oftentimes, that online is victim assistance training that they can take, and so they, you know, I mean, I remember I had to sleep on a friend's couch in Gainesville for a week when I got training, because the agency that I was working for couldn't afford to put me up in a hotel, and so I slept on a friend's couch because it was for a full week, and there were others that because it was in Gainesville, they commuted every day an hour and a half, you know, from Jacksonville to Gainesville, for that training, which is a burden in and of itself. So, but yeah, it's not. I don't want to scare anybody off from it. We need advocates. We need good advocates. We need people that care in this profession and that take it seriously and do it for the right reasons and have the correct training. So I don't want to dissuade anybody from seeking that. We see a lot of criminal justice majors from college and universities. they're studying criminal justice, and then they realize, like, I don't want to be a police officer. That's not what my passion is with criminal justice. And they wonder what else there is within the criminal justice field. And obviously, you can go into law school and become a prosecutor or defense attorney. But also in that world, in the criminal justice world, is advocacy. And we do a lot with the University of North Florida to educate those that are coming up, and getting their degree in criminal justice, that this is an option. Frida in our office was, criminal justice major at UNF, and learned about advocacy, and now it's her career. So, LaTresa, we're just about done. Is there anything you wanted to add before we close out the evening?
No, given that we are in right now, we're in a virtual environment. We just want to let victims know that services don't stop just because we can't see you face to face. There are telephones, there are FaceTimes and webcams and all of those things in which we can still provide resources to you, being a support to you. Our services do not change because of COVID. We just can't be face to face. That's really the only thing. And I do want to encourage, if there are survivors on here, if there is victims of crimes on here, want you to always seek out a victim advocate. If they don't have all the answers, they're going to connect you with someone that can. You need someone to support you. You need someone to talk to. Everybody can't talk to a counselor, and we are not counselors, but we want you to use us as an outlet to be able to express your needs and your concerns so that we can connect you to who can help you. And that's with any crime that you've experienced. We want to be here for you. We want to continue to be there for you as long as you would like for us to. And that really is all I have regarding advocacy.
Wow. And that, I always say, of course you can do it by yourself, but why? You have all of this knowledge and all of this help and all these resources available to you, free of charge. I mean, that's the one thing about advocacy and what Project Cold Case provides and what LaTresa's provides is these services are available to you at no charge. And so if you can have those resources, I hope that you will take advantage of them and please feel free to reach out to us at our office if we've said something today that piques your interest or that you want to know more about. I hope that you'll reach out and that we can help and assist you. LaTresa, thank you so much for joining me tonight. This
You're
is
very welcome.
amazing information. Yeah, and you're so good at what you do. And you're an inspiration to all of us advocates. And so keep it up. Thank you for your time, and we will see you soon in person, hopefully.
Yes, thank you for having me.
All right. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening.